big marquee diamonds in it. It was worth $8,000. And when I took them in to get the prongs redone, and I picked it up later, and the diamonds weren't the same. The
If
prongs
a
were.
craftsman is making a garment or fixing something, what's the law about the extra material? Well, what do you think the answer would be? Here you gave the tailor material to make you a dress or to mend something of yours or to make curtains for you, whatever it is. Do you think he's allowed to keep the extra material? Do you think he has to give it back to you? What would you think would be the honest answer? Saying which would make sense to you if you gave, let's say, example, a tailor. If you gave a
Mhm.
shoemaker leather, but we probably don't give shoemakers levers, but we do go to seamstresses maybe
Right.
to make us a dress or to fix a dress or to line something or make curtains. So what's the honest thing they're supposed to do with the extra material? Even if it's scraps, give it to us or keep it for themselves?
Give it back to you.
Give it back to us because it's innately ours. Anyone else have another opinion on that or agree with Robin?
I agree.
Danielle agrees with Robin. That would be the honest thing to do.
I agree, because you might need to mend your garment.
You can eat it, right? Yeah, you have a value. It has a value to you. Yeah, actually, we had curtains and there was extra material, and my daughter made a little picture so it like matches the drapes. This little picture, yeah, whatever, 100%. It's yours. You can use it. The law is it depends on the custom of the place. Some places what is supposed to be done, if one does it or not is a separate story, but what is supposed to be done is the extra fabric is supposed to be returned, or the extra leather or anything else. I'm just using fabric as the most common example that we encounter in our lives. Other customs, other areas, it's like, no, you gave the material and that's it. It's theirs. It's no longer yours. And if there's scraps, it's theirs, just like not exactly the same. But I'm thinking I'm sending my son to camp and they write that we have to send them $50 spending money for a canteen or whatever. And they write, we will not return the extra money. Doesn't make a difference if he's going to use 10 out of those $50, if he's going to use 49.99 out of those $50, we're not returning the extra money. If they tell you that up front, then they're being honest and not returning it. Otherwise, you're like, wait, what a jip. I sent him $50. He spent $10. Where are the other 40? They're saying, we're not returning it. You know, sometimes I've seen in some organizations where you're buying things from them and they write, if we overcharged you by $5, forgive us. And if we gave you $5 extra, we'll forgive you. Like, in other words, what they're saying is the hassle for $5, it's not worth it in either direction. And we're stating that up front. As long as something is stated up front, then it's honest. Not stated up front, as Dixie said, for even pennies, we have an obligation. So the law is, it depends on what's the law, what's the norm in the place. If craftspeople are expected to return the materials, which I think would be the assumption in anything I've dealt with, and Robin, who probably deals with this in her work, says yes, that is. Yeah. Chicago, definitely the assumption. Then if they don't, they're being dishonest. If it's not the assumption is you gave them your material, now it's theirs, not yours, so then they have no obligation, honestly, to return it. There's an interesting story with the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe when he was a child, that once his father came home and he said to his father, can you tell me what I can do to rectify having embarrassed another person? And his father said, what did you do? And he said, I don't want to tell you what I did, because then I'm not only embarrassing, I'm also gossiping. And his father said, I'm your father and I'm telling you to tell me. And he said that a tailor had come in and had sewn a dress, I guess, for the mother. And the boy, being a little boy, like put his hand in the man's pocket and he pulled out extra material that he was supposed to return, but had not. And of course, then the man was so embarrassed that he was caught in the act. And of course, the little boy who grew up to become the sixth Lubavitcher Rebbe felt so guilty that he unwittingly caused this embarrassment. So obviously, it's things that happen. Not exactly along these lines, but sort of. Speaking of tailors and dresses, there was a Hasidic master who was very, very poor. His name was Reb Zusha of Anapoli. Very, very poor. Very great, holy person, and very, very poor. And his wife kept saying, I need a dress. I need a dress. I'm wearing rags. I'm tattered clothing. It's not right. You have to get the money together to give me a dress. And she kept asking and asking and asking and asking. And finally, though he had like no money, he finally managed to do it. He got her the money for the fabric and to pay the tailor to get a dress, because that's how you got a dress in those days, no Amazon or Walmart's. So she has the money for the material. She has the money for the dress to be sewn. She goes, she gets the material, she hires a tailor, and he's sewing her the dress. It takes about a week. And after the week, he comes with the dress, and she's so excited. This is a dress. She hasn't had a new dress in I don't know, years. Like, she's been wearing rags, tattered rags. She's so happy to finally have a dress. And she sees that the tailor looks pretty upset. And she's like concerned. She was obviously a good woman. And she said to him, like, what's the problem? Like, I see you look so upset. Like, what's the problem? And he said, well, you know, this whole week I've been sewing you your dress, and I have a daughter who's engaged. And her fiance, seeing me working on a dress, thought I was working on a dress for her. But I mean, I wasn't working on a dress for you. And then when he found out that the dress wasn't for his bride, he got really mad. So I don't really know what to do. I don't have the money to now go and get material and get my daughter a dress and sew her a dress. And, you know, her fiance is sort of upset. And the woman heard this and she felt so bad for him, even though she's been wearing the same tattered dress for years. And trust me, it was probably the only dress she owned. She said, you know what? You keep the dress. Give it to your daughter. It's my gift. Wow, thank you. That's so special. And he goes home to give his daughter the dress he sewed for this woman, and now her fiance will be appeased and all is wonderful. So when her husband comes home, Reb Zusha, this great holy person, holy giant, comes home, very, very poor, very, very holy, and his wife tells him the whole story. You know, she was such a good person today. You know, like you want to share your good. You know, she's waited for years for the dress, and this is what happened. And she gave the dress away to this poor tailor's daughter, even though she herself is very poor and dressed in rags. And when Reb Zusha heard the story, he said, that's very nice. Did you pay the tailor for his work? She said, pay the tailor? I gave him my dress, you know, meaning all the cost of the materials he got for free. That was my gift. He said, well, it was very nice of you to give him that gift, but he spent the week working for you. It's not his fault, so to speak, that you then decided to gift him with the dress. You have to go and pay for the dress. And I guess that's what happened. That was the end of the story, but it was a strong thought, and just curious your take on that. Do you view this as like the letter of the law, meaning is what he was saying what is totally what we all should do, or was he having a very high bar of ethics and he was going beyond what would be normative or expected or needed, but just what a very good person does anyway? Do you think that was mandatory, or do you think that was being just a really, really beyond special person? Again, in the context of the story, when she's so poor, and who knows when she's going to have the money for more material for a dress herself, but she gave it away. She thinks she's being so wonderful. And then her husband says, that was wonderful, but you got to pay him for his work. What are your thoughts on that, if you could tweak it into situations that you've experienced in your life?
I've noticed something that the more I study Torah, the more I'm obligated to do things. Like in that context is that okay, it seems like okay, you have to do this because okay, it seems like you think it's simple or it's kind of next level that okay, it doesn't make sense. But really, if you really follow what is expected from you, especially if you know that is the moral thing to do, you will do it regardless of the of the context or the situation. So I'm not saying that now I'm kind of hesitant to study more, but just the last time about oh my gosh, about okay, I will just pay the tax that I'm later on. Okay, I'm always doing that because sometimes I forget. But I come to think of it, I cannot claim innocence as a bliss anymore because I now know. So again, it doesn't matter if it's just 5 cents, 10 cents, but it's kind of compounding. The more I do it, you think it's simple in that context, but the more I do it, I can explain it. It's kind of heavy. Yeah, I don't mean at least from spiritually. So I don't know if that is the right answer, but that's how I see it. Yeah.
I hear what you're
Yes.
saying, and I think there definitely is a truth in that. The more we know, the more there's an obligation. And sometimes that obligation we embrace with joy. And sometimes it feels like 100% have to follow, but it might feel like a burden to always be so focused, to always be so conscious in every situation, like filtering the situation through the will of God. So sometimes when we learn a new law, it's like, oh, it's exciting. I have another way to connect to God. I have another way to serve him. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, in this area too, I've got to put God in. He's here. He's here in every area of my life. You're right. Going back to my question, anyone have any thoughts on that? Do you think what Reb Zusha was demanding from his wife was what all of us would have to do in that situation? Or do you think it was a special level because he was such a holy person that that was how he was assuming we have to behave?
No, I definitely think it's something we all have to do.
Yeah, I
Because
agree.
what's
I
the
agree.
point? If great, you gave it away, but you didn't pay for it. So you really didn't give anything away.
Well, she gave away the cost of the materials. That was what her take was.
Yeah.
That
Okay,
I don't
gotcha.
know material versus labor, how it divided, but let's say it's like a 50-50 split. She did give the material, which was very gracious of her because she was very poor herself. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I'll take out another dress from my closet. I'm sure the only dress she owned was a dress on her back, which was her weekday dress and her Sabbath dress and her nightgown, probably. That's how it was in those days.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
hear what you're saying, and I definitely get that. And Robin, you agree?
I agree that it was the right thing for him to say to her, to remind her of that point in time in which it was being done for her. And then she decided that she would give it to someone else. She still was responsible for what was being done to the dress.
Yeah, I think you articulated that really well, Robin. I think that is exactly the point, as Dixie is saying. He did an honest week of work
Hmm.
for you. Okay, if someone had gifted him the material, would he have taken a week off of his work schedule and sewed the dress for his daughter? We have no clue. But probably not, because he probably needed the wages of the week. So giving the dress, even though he was happy because
Right.
it resolved his issue with his future son-in-law, so he wasn't upset at all. He didn't say, no, keep the dress. I need your money more. Obviously, the material must have been more than the value of his work, because otherwise he could have said, no, give me the wages and you keep the dress. Obviously, the material was more expensive, and he was happy that he got the dress, and it did resolve his issue. But in the end of the day, that's irrelevant. In other words, the fact that the tailor was happy might make us feel like, well, he was happy. He felt like he got a gift, and he did. But that's not part of the consideration. We still have to think, but as Robin's saying, from an honest perspective, he worked for you for a week. That you chose to later gift him the product is just, that was very nice of you. But you still have to pay his work.
Hmm.
But it's just I think it's like an example, which I think is what Natanya was saying, is how nuanced this is.
Hmm.
You're feeling like she was sharing with her husband this wonderful, beautiful deed she did. She's still going to be walking around in tatters and rags, and she was so like, wow, she was sharing with him such a beautiful thing that happened today. Maybe she was grateful that she was able to do something so beautiful, being poor herself, and here she was able to be generous and endow a poor bride with a beautiful dress. But like Natanya's saying, these things really, we even in the glow of the moment, you have to stop and think, like, is this, is there more? Did you do
Hmm.
all? Is there more? If we're speaking of business people, that their work is to repair things. Okay, let's say someone has I don't know, they fix broken silver goods, they fix broken shoes, they fix, nowadays who fixes anything, right? It's cheaper to get new than to fix. But like, let's remember a time when people fix things.
Like when you go to get your shoes fixed.
You get to get your shoes fixed, right? That was what I was thinking as the most common example we might
Yeah.
still do. If you're going to buy something from someone whose business is that he takes in people's items and fixes it, you have to be very careful. You have to make sure he's a very honest person, because he repairs people's shoes. Now he's selling a pair of shoes. Are they his to sell, or did he steal them from a customer? Which I guess would apply the same thing if a dry cleaner starts selling some clothes on the side or anything like that. It's not so simple, because is it his or is it not his? And you can't just say, well, of course, I'm sure like, what's that? No, it has to, there's a lot of dishonesty in this world. Remember, I told you the story of my daughter's stolen iPhone. Well, the saga continues because I keep encouraging her not to wipe it away, not to wipe it clean and still have it locked. And she keeps getting now these harassing text messages that first started off as like, oh, I'm not the thief. I just am concerned for you because I know that, I like resell this, and I don't steal these things, but I'm just a business. But, you should know I'm very concerned that all your private information, whoever purchases this is going to have. So you should just wipe away your phone to protect yourself. A few nice messages like that she ignored. And then the message started getting very violent and very nasty and very abusive. And I wouldn't repeat what the person was saying, but like really, 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 really threatening her if she didn't wipe away her phone. And I told her to ignore those as well. But it's just like, you never know. You never know who is that person. So unless you truly know the level of honesty here, you're not allowed to buy something from someone who gets these items to repair them from other people, because you never know if they're his honestly or not. And it's a very, very big transgression. It's considered being part of a thievery yourself if you would buy stolen items.
So did they get the phone then? Somebody's got the phone. They're trying to get into it, obviously.
Now it's in there's this whole ring of thieves in China. I don't know if they get these phones from all over the world, but yeah, last time it was
Wow.
opened up in China. So we'll see what God wants. We'll see what God
Wow.
Yes. But there's a lot. I mean, there's so much going on in our world in terms of dishonesty. They say now, be so careful answering your phones because these scammers, they record your voice and then they
Yeah,
use
I heard
it to
that.
claim you agreed to buy or whatever, anything, whatever they use it for. Like there's so many levels and levels of dishonesty, and hopefully our honesty will not only help ourselves, but also help flavor the world and shift the world from the direction a lot of it's going in these items. Let's say someone stole something from you and then returned it, but not what was stolen, with something else. Can you take it? Are you allowed to take this item? Someone stole your shoes and they gave you back a pair of shoes, but it wasn't your shoes. Someone stole your coat, they gave you back a coat, but it wasn't your coat. Someone stole your candlesticks and they gave you back candlesticks, but it wasn't your candlesticks. And
Uh-oh.
are you allowed to take it? What do you think?
No,
No.
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 Why not?
stolen goods. You don't know.
You don't know. Any other ideas?
I agree with her. You don't know if they stole it or not.
I agree.
So the actual question is, if you know that this is stolen, they stole your candlesticks, and then for whatever reason they're returning, but they're giving you back a different pair of candlesticks. If you know they were stolen, you're not allowed to. If you don't know they were stolen, then there is room to say you can take them because maybe they weren't stolen. Slash, within something being stolen, there's a certain sort of expiration time when you're allowed to use it. Not the thief, but in another person, which would be if the owner despaired of ever getting it back. So that would be a clause like, if I don't 100% know it's stolen, and if it was stolen, but I don't know, the owner could have despaired of getting it back, and the thief does owe me the value, which he's in essence giving me by someone else's, perhaps, hopefully honest, who knows, then there is room. Right, those are the two factors, that you don't 100% know it was stolen, and if it is stolen, you're assuming the person despaired of ever getting it back. Like if my daughter wiped away her cell phone, basically what she's saying is I'm despairing of ever getting it back, and that's why I'm wiping it away, just in case, God forbid, one day they'll figure out how to break into this version of the Apple phone. I don't want that risk because I totally despair of ever getting it back. It's in China. I'm never going to get it back. So at least let me protect myself. If once they always figure this out eventually, how they're going to break into this Apple. So there is that concept of despairing, and that's actually a critical factor sometimes in these laws. Now, again, if you know it was stolen, even if you're also positive the owner despaired of ever getting it back, you still can't take it. If you 100% know it was stolen, oh yeah, I recognize those candlesticks, I know who they were, then you can't take it. Oh yeah, I remember that person had that massive theft, and these were pictures posted of the items that were stolen, and this is one of the items, then you can't take it. So if you know it was stolen, you can't take it. But if you don't know, and also assume that if it was stolen, the person despaired of ever getting it back, then you are allowed to take it. It's not considered benefiting from theft because, again, there's the despair factor, and he does owe you that money, so it's not like you're benefiting the theft. It's a way of you getting your own possession back. Now, if you bought something, I'm sorry, Taylor, just finish this thought and I'll take a question. If you bought something and then realized it was stolen, and you have a way of tracing the owner, you do have an obligation to give it back to him. If the assumption is the owner despaired of ever getting it back, even though you should not have bought an item that was stolen, but you don't have the onus of trying to find the owner and returning it. But if you feel the owner did not despair and the owner, is putting out ads or something is making you realize that the owner is still looking for it, then even though you bought it innocently and only then realized it was stolen, you do have an obligation to get it back. Like, let's take the example of my daughter's cell phone. If they sold it to someone, which would be a JIP because there's no way of using it while it's still locked, and it has, when you open it up, it says this item is, I don't know, say it says lost or stolen, and here's a number to return it to. So if you got such an item, you can't say, oh, all right, it wasn't stolen, or, oh, well, they despaired. They didn't despair. They still have, when I open up their phone, it's saying, this is my number. That means they're still hoping on some slim chance they can get it back. So then you have an obligation to figure out how to get this. Here it's simple, because you have their phone number, but you have an obligation to get it back to them. They didn't despair. It was stolen. Netanya?
You don't put price on your conscience and your soul, right? I mean, if it's the right thing to do, because for instance, I think I have a situation like that. I have to return it's, something and it's taking so much of my time. But when I return that item, it feels so good. And I was like, because like going to the class today, okay, it's second time in a oh my gosh, I can explain there's something like pushing me. I was like, there's no way I can, miss the class again. So I think, it applies in general that yeah, you can put price on something. I mean,
You're
I
so
don't know,
right.
but
You're so right. So
yeah.
because you're like resistant and saying, no, I don't have time, I don't have time, and then you force yourself and you do it anyway, yes, we have a wonderful feeling when we do the right, especially when we have to fight ourselves to do it. And I always view that as, yes, our little victories, the tests that we go through, little tests, big tests. It's interesting that Tanya is saying that she had this type of situation where she had to return something to someone else, and it was difficult. I don't know if she wants to share with us a story, but if not, who knows how she found the owner or getting it back to the owner, or whatever the situation is. I realized once that I had a book that someone had photocopied for me, like an entire book. Don't ask the backstory. And I was using it, and I was like, one day, like, hit me like, wait, this is stolen. I mean, I don't want to say the person who photocopied it stole, but like, I have something that I shouldn't be having. I have an entire book photocopied. And I was like, whoa, what do I do? So I got the number of the author and I called him and I said, this book you wrote, yeah. Well, I have a copy of it and it was photocopied and given to me. So I want to pay you for the book. Oh, this was a religious book. So a religious person. He's like, oh, no, you don't have to do that. I'm like, no, I don't want to, have a book that's not mine. He said, okay, this is like the value, give this value to charity. I'm like, okay, fine, thank you. I remember another situation I had. This was many years ago, and a new Chumash came out, like a Torah, newly redone. Nowadays, it's sort of standard, but this was like 30 years ago. So it was very wow, and it was very expensive. And at that time, when they first came out with it, they only sold a complete set, meaning there's 5 books of the Torah, and to buy it, you had to buy all 5 books, which was a lot because they were very expensive. You had to buy all 5, and here I wanted my students to be able to benefit from this because it was retypeset, so it was beautiful, clear font, and it made the study of these texts much easier. And the previous way, prior to 30, probably not more than 30 some years ago, the fonts were very hard to read, and it just created a whole other barrier in the learning. Besides the language, besides the abbreviations, besides the concepts, it was hard to read the letters. So I called the publisher. I said, I'm a teacher, and I can't ask my students to buy 5 volumes. I can ask them to buy 1 volume. I can't ask them to buy 5. Do I have your permission? I bought the set. I bought all 5 volumes. Do I have your permission to photocopy chapter by chapter? Because I want my students to benefit from this beautiful work you did of retypesetting the entire Torah with all of its commentary, all of the classical commentaries. And I spoke to the editors. I don't know how I got the number and spoke to him, but I definitely remember the conversation. And he said, yes. He said, you know what? I am confident that when your students see how much, how user-friendly this is, how much easier it is to study, they'll end up wanting to buy it. So I give you my permission to photocopy it. And that's what I did for that year. I think after that year, they realized it was a bit much to say you had to buy all 5 volumes, and then they just sold it like everyone else sells it. 1 volume, you could buy 1 volume at a time, and then I have my students buy those volumes because they were so much better. But I remember that first year, he said, okay, yeah, I give you permission to photocopy it because they're going to end up buying it. And that's so, it really is something like, like Natania's saying, sometimes you have to put out effort. I don't know how I got the phone number. I mean, this was, 30, 35 years ago. It wasn't like I was Googling, I don't know how I got the number, how I figured it out. But it was so wonderful putting in that effort and then, feeling like, wow, got a positive answer and feeling like this was a wonderful way to do it, like an honest way to do it. So yes, I agree with Natanya. You can never put a price tag on these things, and it's worth pushing ourselves, and it definitely feels great. Going back to this idea of the person who fixes things, like the shoemaker who fixes shoes, or are there people around that fix pots, people that sharpen knives, people that fix things. Still, if you gave your item to be fixed, now here's a different story. Before we said this shoemaker also happens to be selling shoes, are you allowed to buy from him? Probably not, unless you absolutely know those are that he has the right to sell. This tailor is also selling clothing. I know he fixes other people's clothing. Maybe this is stolen goods. I don't know. Well, if you don't know for sure, you can't buy it from him. Now we have a different situation with such a craftsman. You gave him your knife or shoes or silver, whatever, to be fixed, and he gave you back a different. Are you allowed to take it?
I had that happen with my wedding ring. It had
I was just thinking jewelry.
mhm.
With jewelry, yes. What
It
happened?
had big marquee diamonds in it. It was worth $8,000. And when I took them in to get the prongs redone, and I picked it up later, and the diamonds weren't the same. The prongs were huge. And I complained, and there was no proof. But he stole the diamonds out of there. And because they were beautiful, they were such beautiful marquee diamonds. Because he commented when he looked at them when I brought it in to get it repaired, he said, "These are some of the most beautiful marquee diamonds I've ever seen." And another time when I had a pink diamond that Jack had bought me, and it was rare in a ring, and I lost it somewhere. Well, we thought we knew, but we couldn't find it. And so we had it insured. And so I thought, no big deal. I'll get my $2,500 back and a new pink diamond. Well, I took it in and they called and they said, well, we'll replace the diamond, but we're not going to replace it with a pink diamond. We're going to replace it with a white diamond. And I said, that's not right. And that's because the white diamond, I think, was $1,500. And I said, then give me my money. And they said, well, we'll give you $1,500 because that's what we can replace it for. I said, I have been paying on my policy for $2,500 insurance, and you're going to give me $1,500. I said, that's not right, but there's nothing you can do about it because that's their policy.
Wow.
So be careful with jewelry, ladies.
I remember I had a situation, my diamond ring, what was missing. Months later, the ring, it's a whole long story how the ring was found. I'll save that for a different class. It's a very beautiful, to me, very inspiring story of God's protection of my ring, but I won't share it now. So literally, I lost it in December. It was found in June. And it went through many situations from December to June till I got it back. But when I got it back, I called the insurance company. And I said, I found my ring. My ring was found. You gave me money for it. The ring was found. They're like, great. So give us our money back. And I'm like, I don't have your money. I spent it already. Trust me, it went on life. It got spent on life. And they're like, okay, well, if you can't give us back the money, give us back your ring. And I'm like, my ring? This was a miracle that it came back to me. I don't want to lose my ring. So they're like, well, you got to do one or the other, lady. And I was like, well, what if I pay off? I don't remember what I offered. I was very, very tight financial situation in those days. I don't remember if I offered $25 a month, $50 a month, like something like that. Probably $50 a month. I mean, it was worth a few $1,000s. I probably offered $50 a month. I said, well, I could pay $50 a month. And she was like, $50 a month? She said, just a minute. And then she went to speak to, I guess, her supervisor. And she said, because you were honest and you called us and told us you found the ring, we'll accept it at $50 a month. And I did that for quite a number of years. And eventually I paid it off. And it was also like Dixie was saying, it was, I'm sure, I don't remember, but I'm sure I said, well, I'm a religious Jew. And as such, I obviously have to be honest, but I'm sure I said something, I hope so, that just, gives a it is a good feeling to know that you're sanctifying God's name, because obviously, you know, many people in that situation wouldn't call back their insurance company to say, oh, it was found. Obviously, hopefully you would hope they would, but besides, yeah, you were honest in the first place, it was lost. You weren't being deceitful. When it was found, you might forget to tell your insurance company. So when something like that happens and you have an opportunity to sanctify God's name and say, I'm religious, I believe in God, and therefore I'm an honest person, it's a special moment. But anyway, so this is your situation. You gave, unlike Dixie's horrible story, which is so sad, and yes, the warning is look into them, but Dixie said she did. So I guess come with your appraisal and show it to the guy, you know, this ring is appraised at this and this amount. I just want you to know, da da da. So like, in other words, don't start up, don't steal. And then you get something back that's not yours. Are you allowed to take it or not? So the answer is, it depends. In certain situations, yes. And in certain ones, no. Sort of yes with three caveats, with three conditions. One is, you will be allowed to take it, though you clearly know it's not yours. You gave in a pair of silver candlesticks to be fixed, and you got back probably pretty comparable, but you know they're not yours. So it's possible that you could say, yeah, I'm allowed to take them because I did give him my candlesticks. He's giving me back other ones. It makes a lot of sense that maybe whoever gave him these said, you could, sell them, sell them, which in essence means he took them and is using them. So you could assume that. But if he himself does not return it to you, if like his wife gives it to you or his children give it to you, then you can't take it. Because then the assumption would be there's a mistake here. This isn't mine. It might be nicer than mine. It might be better than mine. It might be more expensive than mine. It's not mine and I can't take it. Or even if the craftsman himself, if he would say to you, oh, take your candlesticks, take your ring, then it's like, no, this one's not mine. The fact that you're saying take your ring, I know it's not mine. Take your candlesticks, I know it's not mine. Obviously, he's making a mistake. So then I can't take it and have to say, no, it's a mistake. I have a different ring. I have different candlesticks. But if he just gives it to you without saying it's yours and he's giving it to you personally and it's not like some other person who could be making a mistake and not knowing which one you gave him, then you actually are allowed to take it with the assumption of, okay, if it's equal worth, then I'm comfortable taking it. Obviously not in Dixie's situation, but in a situation where you're comfortable taking it, obviously it probably makes sense to ask him and say, I gave you a different pair. I don't mind taking these. Do you want to give me these instead of the ones I gave you? Then it would be permissible. Now, what if, we'll just do one other situation. This has happened actually to my children several times. I don't know if this at all happens in any of the worlds you're in, but in mine, actually, it happens sometimes. What if you come home, let's say from like a wedding, with the wrong coat, or something like that? You were at some event and your coat's gone and you see there's another coat hanging that's supposed to be yours, but it's not yours. So if you understand that it was an accident, you have to make a big effort to return this item and you can't use it. Meaning, even though the other person took your coat, right? Generally, just like Dixie says about the jewelry, I'm saying about like coats and big events, sometimes it's better just to keep yours and to check it. It could save some problems. But somebody else walked off with your coat by mistake and left you theirs by mistake. Even though they took yours, if you know it was an innocent mistake, you cannot use theirs and you have to make every effort to return it to them. Now, if though you're like, it was not an innocent mistake, I hear this goes on in these halls and thieves take nicer coats and leave me their not good coats and take my good coat, and it was a thief that did it, then you are allowed to use the coat they left you. In essence, that's not called benefiting from the theft because you'd much rather have your own much nicer coat, but at least it's a coat now. But if it was a mistake and you're like, no, I don't think any ring of thieves is taking my coat, it was clearly a mistake, then you cannot use the code, even though the other person was the one that made the mistake. You cannot use the code and you have to make efforts to find the code. Now, this has happened to my children. I can't even count how many times, not per se in weddings, but like very often when we go to New York, go to the place of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and there's thousands and thousands of people, so many times my children have lost their coats. I can't say how many times my children have lost their coats, how many coats I've lost, where they put it someplace and when they come back, it's gone. And, who knows what. I actually remember once with my youngest son, with Beryl, he had a coat, was hung up after services, the coat's gone. And my daughter who was with him felt really bad, and she searched the whole synagogue. She could not find the coat. And then, like, maybe a year later, she saw his coat hanging there. So I guess someone took it by accident and then, like, oops, and then returned it, just brought it back and just hung it up there. What are they supposed to do? And she found it, like literally, I think it was a year later. So this happens so many times. Not that someone left theirs in return, just like gone. I remember once my son, there's a special prayer book we have for the high holidays, and he was in the high holiday services in 770 in the Lubavitch World Headquarters, the synagogue of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, with tens of thousands of people. And again, it's a place where my sons lose so often, not only their coats, but also their holy books. You put it down, you turn around, it's gone. And somebody from a few rows away said to him, "Hey, Turin, can I borrow your," it's called a machzor. "Can I borrow your machzor?" That's the prayer book for the high holidays. And my son's like, "My machzor? I'm holding my machzor. I'm using my machzor." He's like, "No, look, it has your name in it. Mendel Turin." I guess this guy knew him. And he's like, "Oh, that one. Yeah, I lost that one a few years ago. Yeah, you can borrow it. It'd be nice if you get it back to me afterwards." Like, it just happens. Or I remember another story, my son, the same son, he was at my sister's house and he saw a prayer book and he's like, "That looks really familiar." And he opened it up and it said his first name inside, Mendel. And he's like, "Oh, this is my prayer book. Whoa, that's nice. I lost it so many years ago. I lost it by my aunt's house." And my sister said, "No, that's not your prayer book." And she thought it was a different person's with same name. He's like, "No, look, this is my father's handwriting. My father wrote my name. This is my prayer book. He didn't write my last name. That should have done that. But this is my prayer book. Look, it's my father's handwriting." She's like, "Oh, you're right." So it might sound like, again, maybe it's more in my world than in your world. I don't know if other people have these situations, but I've definitely been there many, 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 many times. Many times. So it was really interesting to understand the law. Now, in none of these, in my situations, it's actually, I do think once someone did leave my son a coat. I think actually once there was something. And I actually remember another time where someone realized they walked off with my son's coat because I guess my son had his name in it. And somehow they tracked him down and said, "I have your coat." You're like, "Oh, really? Wow. I never thought I'd see it again. Yeah, I have your coat. I took it by mistake." So people sometimes do that, especially I'm saying in these mob scenes with so many people and so many coats. All these coats look alike. And you don't realize you're taking the wrong coat. So in such a situation, if you took the wrong coat or if someone else took your coat and you wound up with theirs, if it was an innocent mistake, you are not allowed to use the other coat. You can't say, "Well, someone has mine, I have someone else's." No, you absolutely, absolutely cannot use it. It doesn't make a difference that you lost your own. You absolutely have to try to return it to them. And unless, again, if you know it was actually stolen, and that's what's happening lately, don't check your coat. And if your coat got stolen, then you can use the other.
A question. So we actually had this happen a few years ago to us. My husband and son were
situation. Okay.
yeah, it's a little bit different. So my husband and son were traveling and they got home and in the back seat of the car was a random coat. It was a men's, like, it wasn't my husband's size at all. I forget what size it was, but it wasn't my husband's size. And he's like, "Okay, there was only two other men in the car during the whole trip. And it was his dad and then our realtor." And so he's like, "Okay." So he calls his dad, calls the realtor. They both say not their coats, which is very strange. And so we're racking our brains trying to figure out whose coat this could be. And long story short, we never find the owner of the coat. The coat actually is at my father-in-law's because we thought that it was his coat. And so we had brought it back to him, even though he said he wasn't. It was the same size that he wears, James said. So we're like, okay, well, maybe if he sees it, he'll be like, "Oh, yeah." Well, we showed it to him and he's like, "No, that's not my coat." So we put it in his closet, but we don't know what to do with the coat because we can't find the owner of the coat.
I don't think you should put it in his closet because
Okay.
you are not allowed to use that. I mean,
Yeah, he's not using it. We don't know what to do with it. It's still
what
there.
I'm saying is the fear would be if it's in his father-in-law's closet,
Right.
since it's
Mm-hmm.
his father's size, maybe
Uh-huh.
accidentally, or he just needs a coat, something happened, he grabbed
Right.
his coat. You clearly know the story, and it's clearly not your husband's size, so it would never have that.
Yeah.
Now, there is the concept here. What I said was the despair factor. So
Mm-hmm.
there's the letter of the law would be in exactly that type of situation. If the original owner completely despaired of ever getting his coat back, then you are allowed to use it because there's no sign, there's no way of identifying him, there's no way of returning it.
Right.
But being beyond the letter of the law people that I'm sure you are, you're like, how in the world am I supposed to know if he despaired of it or not? Maybe he's
Right.
a perpetual optimist and he's just confident that someday this coat's going to miraculously walk back into his closet, even though doesn't have a name, doesn't have any identification on it. So again, according to the law, if there's no identification, there's no way to identify it, there's no way to return it, and the assumption is the owner totally despaired of it, you would be allowed to use it. But if you say, I don't know, maybe he didn't despair, as long as you think he maybe didn't despair, you are not allowed to use it. You just have to keep it. I have I have a few items like that in my house. Someone once left, no, it's someone once left a green umbrella. I have a lot of like guests. I don't know who they are. They come for a few nights. People in Chicago, can we stay with you? Yeah, I don't really pay attention. Whatever. It's just part of the, Jewish Orthodox culture, at least in my house. So somebody, I don't know who he was, left a green umbrella. I know it's not mine. Many times I've been stuck without an umbrella, but I know I can't use it.
Right.
I have someone that left an envelope with cash. No markings on it, no name, a bank envelope with cash. I can't use it. It's not mine. I don't know whose it is. I have no way of returning it, but I can't use it. I had a situation, I thought, that someone left a valuable gold necklace. It was like a heavy gold necklace. And I'm like, a gold necklace? Let me ask. My mother-in-law, my sisters, nobody had it. No clue. I was just like, okay, I can't use it. Put it on the side. And then after I don't know how many years, I realized it was fake. I maybe started I looked at it and I realized, yeah, no, it's actually fake. Even though it said on it Italy and all that, it looked like it was like somebody was trying to fool someone that it was real, but it was actually, I saw it was fake. So I was like, okay, whatever. But yeah, in those situations, you just sort of say, I'm doing my part. I'm holding it. Maybe the person has not despaired. I have no clue. So I have no way of knowing if he despaired or not. So why should I assume he despaired? And just, I'm waiting. I have it. If God wants, somehow I'll be able to return it. If not, wait for the redemption and do it then.